Welcome to the Blue Leadership Podcast, hosted by Dennis Nayor, a retired multi-agency police chief from the state of New York. Blue Leadership is a podcast by law enforcement for today's law enforcement leaders, taking you inside the experiences and careers of public safety experts from across the country.
Maddie, thank you for that introduction. Great to be back. And today's guest is Deputy Chief Cary Gensemer of the Murfreesboro, Tennessee Police Department. He's a deputy chief there, 29 years of law enforcement service. Before his time in law enforcement, he served with the United States Marine Corps. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy. He's a graduate of the FBI Leader Trilogy Series, which is huge. Graduate of the SMIP Leadership Institute. Lots more I can go on with, but without further ado, Deputy Chief Gensemer, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Jumping right in, let's go to our first question. Hurricane Helene, natural disaster. It came by, hit the East Coast hard. You were involved with that. Can you just talk a little bit about your role in leadership, managing a natural disaster, what you did, how it affected your community, and whatever you feel the listeners and viewers could gain value from?
Sure. Not very often that Tennessee or Western North Carolina can say that they were devastated by a hurricane, but Helene was the exception to that. It did not affect Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro is in the center of the state of Tennessee. We're about 30 miles just south east of Nashville. But I serve on a incident management team through the Tennessee Emergency Management Association. I'm on the Middle Tennessee team. There are 3 teams in the state. And ours was called up to respond to Upper East Tennessee to assist with my specific site was Irwin, Tennessee, which is a very small town just over the North Carolina state line. And I responded up there to work in the incident command post, which was a middle school there in the town of Irwin, with firemen and medics, National Guardsmen and women, and any emergency responder discipline you can imagine. And we all came together to try to manage that disaster and assist all the local first responder agencies were obviously overwhelmed due to the devastating flooding. So that was my role, and responding up to Upper East Tennessee. It's about 4.5 hour drive from here. So it's really not even, Tennessee's a pretty long state, so it's quite a ways off.
So from your point of view, what do you see as the biggest challenges from a leadership perspective with trying to manage or be in some way part of managing any sort of natural disaster?
Well, in this circumstance, we've had our share of, I think I've worked 2 tornadoes that hit our community here in Murfreesboro, one in 1996 and then another one in 2009, where we had some significant impact from that. But I think my advice to any leader who is experiencing a natural disaster or any large event of that nature in their jurisdiction is to not to be so prideful to think that, I can handle this with just my crew. So that there are a lot of FEMA and TEMA resources out there with the incident management teams that county and city mayors can call upon to come in and help assist in those circumstances. And I don't know that the town of Irwin, I'm probably the worst natural disaster in the entire history of the state of Tennessee. I don't know that a town or a county the size of Unicoi County or Irwin, Tennessee, they can't do that alone. And I think you have to understand that it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, one of the things in law enforcement we've talked about for years is building those partnerships, establishing those relationships and that networking well before there's a need for mutual aid and services. And I'm guessing, if my hunch is correct, that you've done that well in advance.
We have, and I can't place enough emphasis on the importance of relationship building.
And when you're looking and you're explaining to like others, because it's just a matter of time where some disaster may strike any town, USA. What about those partnerships do you think was the greatest asset?
When people remember you and they remember, how you treat them, how you make them feel when you've worked with people before and you build those relationships and you have those connections, not only across the state, but the country, having that familiarity, people will be a lot more apt to call upon you for assistance and will trust you to do those things for them, and vice versa.
And that was my question. Do you get requests for when there is some sort of disaster nearby to send some of your
Yes.
officers to help or tactical
Yes,
assets or equipment?
oftentimes we do. In this situation, because we were so far away and it really wasn't a huge law enforcement response, it was more of a natural disaster with, requiring large debris teams and a lot of search and rescue, not really the sole function of law enforcement. But in this set of circumstances, we have a canine officer here, Officer Alexander. She is a bloodhound. Her canine partner is named Kari, and Kari is probably one of the best cadaver dogs I would say, in the southeastern United States. So she's in high demand. She works about as much time away from the city of Murfreesboro as she does in the city of Murfreesboro. And she did respond out to this incident. She responded to, I believe, Washington County, Tennessee, which is Johnson City area, where the same general region. And she was, for obvious reasons, out there searching for the missing.
Right. And this is a profession where none of us get through it alone, and we need our partner agencies and help in wherever there's a specialty that you as an agency leader may not have. And I think that's a great example of where you're sharing a key asset that most places would not be able to do on their own.
But I'll have to say that our local fire departments and all of the emergency responders in the Rutherford County area, which is the county that Murfreesboro is in, everybody played a part. I got to work with some of my local fire and rescue crews and EMS personnel and emergency management folks in some of the other cities in my county with their fire personnel. And one thing that I will have to say and brag on is our county really delivers when people need help outside of our jurisdiction.
It's comforting to know, I'm sure, for all the nearby agencies. And one of the things I wanted to ask is, with every emergency situation, disaster, even if things go very smoothly, there's always some things that don't go as smoothly as you like, and there's sometimes lessons learned. Are there any lessons you've learned that you can share that you think is good for others to know before they get to a natural disaster of their own to deal with?
Oh, well, you have to always expect that you're going to encounter friction, and anything that doesn't go as planned, which nothing ever really does go as planned, can slow down the operation of things, and you have to be prepared for that. I know that sometimes when you go into another jurisdiction, especially as a management team member, you have to be very careful about stepping on toes of people who are you're in their town or in their jurisdiction, and you have to really you have to be very diplomatic sometimes. That was not the case at all when I responded to Upper East Tennessee. They were very gracious and they were happy to have us and very accommodating.
Yeah, it's funny, as you would describe it, diplomacy was the word that was in my mind. And but it's nice to know that it wasn't even something necessary because they were just happy to have you there as part of their team. So you obviously have, I said at the beginning, a lot of high-level leadership schools, the FBI Leader Trilogy Series, the FBI National Academy, the SMIP. I didn't mention, which I will now, you're also a graduate of the University of San Diego's LEPSO, Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership Master's Degree Program. My question is, all those leadership schools and LEPSO, what were some of the things that came as a byproduct of having that training and expert knowledge that helps you in managing either your day-to-day operations as a deputy chief or a natural disaster where you're part of a team?
Well, I'll tell you my experience with Lepsel from the very onset of my first phone call with the admission personnel and staff, from Dr. Fritzfold all the way down. Everybody treated me so well in my process of getting enrolled, and then throughout the process of being a student in the Lepsel program. Some of my key takeaways from Lepsel are, if you are in a position of leadership in law enforcement and you are looking to take the next steps, which I recently did when I was promoted to Deputy Chief in January of this year, I drew upon a lot of my my learning from the Lepsel program. It's so geared towards modern issues and relevant issues in law enforcement that I was able to very comfortably speak during my assessment center on, certain things in our career that are relevant right now. And it flowed really easily for me. And I credit a lot of that to the Lepsel program. Another thing that I consider to be a great benefit, we talked about developing relationships. Fellow students in my Lepsel classes were from all over the country. So I know that if I ever have an issue with something where I need some help in California or Washington State or New Jersey, I know that I have members of my student body that would be there for me if I needed to reach out. I know somebody in most every jurisdiction in the United States as a result of going through the Lepsel program. So to this day, I have a lot of young leaders in my agency who are looking to take that next step in their careers. And I think that getting a master's degree in criminal justice or related field I really feel like that is a benefit. And I think that people are looking for that, whether it's in your agency or if you're looking to go outside of your agency, people are looking for that relative that education. So I've encouraged a lot of my team here to try to join Lepsel, or at least another university that has a similar. I don't know that there are any, maybe the University of Virginia, but nobody's really like USD in the Lepsel program. So I've really tried to encourage folks to lean into that program.
Yeah, and to the point that actually other companies or universities are trying to model themselves after Lepsel because it is so unique and it is so valued, and it can be imitated but not duplicated, I think is a key way to say it. And I think what you hit on, the contemporary issues course, we try to design it in a way that a law enforcement executive in the practical world can apply readily whatever they're learning. And the fact that you said you could and that it helped you, that's the goal that we're trying to achieve. And the networking, people outside of law enforcement may not understand just how much of an importance that plays, because when you can pick up the phone and call someone from across the country or in the next state over or wherever and get the necessary assistance you need because you have that Lepsel link, that's huge.
It is huge.
You know what, Chief, what I wanted to ask you is, you were also in the United States Marine Corps, and again, thank you for your service there.
Thank you.
And when you came on to law enforcement, how did your time in the service prepare you for your policing career?
Well, I was a child when I went into the Marine Corps in 1989. I graduated high school and went directly to Parris Island, so I didn't know anything about anything. But I learned pretty quick. In Marine Corps boot camp, they taught me fast. I will have to say that the Marine Corps does a fantastic job of instilling leadership principles into even the youngest Marine Corps recruit on Parris Island or at Marine Corps Recruit Depot there in San Diego. We learn the philosophies and principles of leadership in the first weeks of Marine Corps boot camp. And then they just pound that into your brain for pretty much daily throughout your career in the Marine Corps. You're going to see and experience and learn leadership. Another thing I learned from the Marine Corps is what it's like to have poor leadership inflicted upon you. And I had some of that too, just like we probably all have throughout our professional careers. But the Marine Corps showed me that nothing can be as tough as that. So it's really made everything else in my life manageable because of the hardships I experienced, both physically and mentally in the United States Marines. Very, very rewarding experience that I always carry and draw upon even to this day.
Yeah, and there's a philosophy is clarity through contrast, and sometimes seeing poor leadership, it's a horrible place to be at, but it's a good place to be from when you become a leader so that you know what not to do, because in contrast, that's not how to treat people, or that's not the way to achieve the mission, or that's not the way to, get the most out of those who are serving. I mean, so you learn so much, and it's pretty clear that you brought back a tremendous amount from your time in the Marine Corps.
You're exactly right.
So you've done a lot. You've 29 years in. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge. What career aspirations remain for you?
I've kind of learned to be content and happy in the moment where I am in life instead of always trying to look down range for the next best thing. I'm still relatively new. Matter of fact, I'm still on probation in my present job, so I better not mess up in the next few months. But I still have a lot to learn. Takes 6 months to a year to kind of get your feet under you in any new position. I'm 53 years old. I have a few more years of law enforcement career left in me, I think. If I am ever called upon to lead my agency, I would willingly do that. I also, consider looking at other cities that may be in need of a police chief. When my son, who's about to turn 16, gets out on his own and I'm a little bit more free to move about the country, I may consider throwing my name in the hat for a chief's job somewhere else. I don't know if I want it to be in a city the size of Murfreesboro, but something pretty cool about being a small town police chief, I think.
You may have mentioned at the beginning, what is the population of your city?
I want to say about 170, 180,000.
Got it. Yeah, that's a decent sized city.
Yeah, we're about
police and
331 sworn when we're fully staffed, which another thing I noticed from Letchell is a lot of the agencies in other areas of the country, similar sized cities to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, do not have near the staffing of sworn personnel that we do. We have, 331 for a city of 170,000 is a lot more than some of the agencies that were representative in the Letchell program that I was talking with some of the students about.
And do you have vacancies as well, or are you pretty?
We do have some vacancies. We always have some vacancies because people are always retiring and people are always looking to. We're not losing folks to other law enforcement agencies anymore. We're really kind of losing them as they get out of the law enforcement profession altogether. That has changed in the last year or so. We're starting to, it seems like the pendulum is starting to swing back in the favor or in our direction. So we're not seeing the vacancies that we once were during COVID and all of that stuff going on back then in 2020.
And that's a testament to your leadership. That's why I asked that question, because so many agencies are hemorrhaging officers and they're losing at a much quicker rate of attrition than they can bring on. Even if their authorized staffing is a certain number, they're well below that and they don't even have the applicants to meet that before going through the entire processes. So that's great to know that obviously you're going to lose to retirement, which is always going to be the case, but that you're otherwise doing pretty well.
All right.
And with that, I wanted one little ancillary. We talk leadership. With the newer generation coming in, are there any challenges? Because what you came through from the United States Marine Corps, in that era built a solid foundation for you in your leadership style and your trajectory of your career. That's not the way it is now with the new generation coming in as it once was. And how are you managing that?
I'm going to have to say I'm not seeing that as much here. We still have I guess our pool of applicants we've been very fortunate. We have some great young people that are interested in law enforcement. A lot of them are coming out of the military. We're really close to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is one of the larger Army bases. So we have an endless pool of veterans that are interested in our agency. So we've been fortunate in that regard. It is changing, and I know what you mean by that. And sometimes that can be a challenge, and I think we as leaders have to adapt our style, and you have to be able to kind of meld yourself into somebody that an employee that differs from you like that will respond to.
And I did not know your proximity to the military base, and that's an awesome funneling avenue for applicants. And I don't think I've heard a chief or a deputy chief in any recent times say they had an endless pool of applicants. So that's an amazing thing that your agency has nearby, and it gives you a choice to be as selective as you can be.
I have to say, I'm super fortunate to work in law enforcement in this community, because you don't hear often of a police agency that has the support of their city leadership like we do. Our county leadership, our district attorney's office is great to work with. We're very blessed here in the city of Murfreesboro. Our mayor, city council, city management team, they recognize the importance of having a strong first responder, disciplines in our city. They really invest heavily in public safety here. So I have to give a lot of credit to them, because they keep making our pay to where, law enforcement now is an arms race. If you want to attract the best applicants, you've got to look at what the other agencies in your area are paying, and you've got to try to either beat that or at least be comparable. And our city leadership does a fantastic job of recognizing that. So it's hard to say, I want to go work for Smyrna Police Department or the Tennessee Highway Patrol. And there's not much that really differentiates between the larger agencies in our area anymore. So that helps us a lot.
Yeah, and two things. Kudos for one, for you recognizing that so distinctly, and two, for the fact that not only is the pay good, but the fact that there's a very healthy working environment. That's huge, and it's oftentimes more important than the pay itself. So that combination, that, for me listening, explains very clearly why your staffing is good and your pool of applicants is solid. And what I wanted to ask, and this will lead right into it, is leadership philosophies. Which are the primary ones you subscribe to? And I have a sense, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I like to try to be a Swiss Army knife. Not everybody that you lead responds to the same leadership style. As you just can't have just one anymore. I've changed throughout the years. I've changed with the positions I've had, as a crime suppression unit sergeant 15, 20 years ago, however long ago, I would have to be, a little bit more ramrod-like. I'd have to, kind of, the old do it because I said so doesn't work anymore. And I think as I've matured and grown and had more experience in my leadership career, I've learned that. Now, I will say this. Sometimes there's a time and a place for the do it because I said so, because we are in a very dangerous profession where I don't always and won't always have time to explain to you why I need you to do something because of time and risk. So there still is a place for that in our career. But I think that I think a good leader has to approach different situations and different people with a different style. So you probably better know how to be a little bit like all of the leadership styles.
Yeah, and what you're describing, that adaptive leadership style, is very key because it allows you to understand when you can give that flexibility and freedom for people to have more of a say versus when this is what we're doing. No discussion. We have to
Right.
get this done because you're saying it has to get
Yeah.
done. And it's important to understand that distinction. And I agree, and having the ability to understand transformational or transactional or servant and all of those, and when they all come together and flow nicely, you can
Right.
adapt. And it sounds like what you
I
do.
really am a fan of the decentralized command theory of making sure that you're very careful about who you promote and putting the right people on the team, and then trusting in their abilities or developing their abilities to the point where you can trust them to do the right thing with or without you. And then I'm a huge fan of staying out of my staff's way. If they're doing something well, I don't need to be in the recipe. They can handle it, and I trust them to handle it. And I've got a really good team. So thank goodness for that. I have folks that make me look good on a daily basis, and I don't have to lift a finger. And while that's a great place to be, it's also important that you let them know how much you appreciate them.
For sure. The intrinsic value of people knowing they're appreciated, knowing their work is valued, and that they have the autonomy to do it and they're not micromanaged. That's so important. You're doing everything right. It's great to hear this just as we're talking here. And I'm pretty confident that they appreciate that too. And for the listeners and viewers, for podcasts or books, or there's so much out there on leadership, is there anything that you would recommend for others to pursue in terms of expanding their leadership knowledge?
Well, I have to confess, I am not a big reader or listener of leadership anything, which may be one of my flaws. I don't study a lot of leadership podcasts and or read a lot of leadership books. But my favorite leadership book is the It's Your Ship about the USS Benfold. It's an older leadership book that I'd say most of your faculty and students and law enforcement leaders are familiar with. But I can't remember the author's name, Captain Abrahoff, or if I'm pronouncing that right, but he did an amazing job of turning a destroyer in the United States Navy around from being, very mediocre, if not a low performer, to one of the highest performing ships in the United States Navy. That's weird to hear a Marine talk about a sailor leadership book, but this was fantastic. If anybody has an opportunity to read it, I would highly recommend that book. Talks about doing the little things, focusing on the quality of life things with any organization. And as you fix and correct the small things, the big things kind of follow. I have listened to this podcast a few times and have gotten a lot out of it. And the National Academy sends out some frequent publications through the National Academy Associates that has some good leadership trainings in it. Another thing that I took from the LEPSL program is, I think it was Chief Neil Gang and the officer wellness piece that he did at his organization, where he started the wellness app for his officers. And that's something that I took from my LEPSL experience and applied it here. And we're trying to do the same things here in those apps, depending on which one you decide to go with. The one that we purchased has a lot of leadership materials in there. I think Jocko Willing partners with them. So there's a lot of his leadership stuff is on there, and trying to get that rolled out a little bit more where our people use it more.
Yeah, we can do an entire mini podcast or a full podcast on just the wellness component. And what you just did from that leadership book about the small things, taking care of your people. they're huge. The small things become the big things. And when you look at leadership in the macro sense, it's really giving the platform, taking care of people, doing it as a servant. And as a leader, you should be working harder than everyone else to give them the ability to do their job. And everything you said aligns exactly like that.
You got to sweat the small stuff. You always have to sweat the small stuff. And I don't know who told me this, but never walk past a problem. And I've learned a lot from my police chief here, Chief Bowen. He's a details guy, and he notices details of things that I've never, ever thought of paying attention to. And, he'll point something out, something as simple as, why is the sign for the parking, why is the sign crooked? You're noticing little things in your agency, or why is the paint chipped in this hallway? He pays attention to those details. And because he pays attention to the details, everything else I've learned a lot from that.
Yeah, what a great takeaway. And you look at a picture, it's composed of thousands and thousands of pixels. Every one of those pixels by itself, maybe not so much. You put them together, it's the picture.
Right.
And I think that's a great takeaway that you just left us with. A lot of things we've covered. We talked about managing natural disasters, partnering with agencies before there's a problem, leadership in general. We covered so many things. And one, thank you very much for your time. Two, is there anything you'd like to close out with and leave the listeners and viewers with? Anything at all? Anything I didn't ask?
I just want to say how much I appreciate LEPSL and continuing to feel like I'm a part of such an awesome program. And the university's been great about keeping all of us alum, connected. And I really enjoy and appreciate being a part of the LEPSL community. And a great honor to be invited to be on this podcast, and I really appreciate it.
Well, likewise, thank you. And you are giving it all back in your leadership to those you lead and those in your department and community. So similarly, thank you, Deputy Chief Gensemer. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to meet the law enforcement heroes and leaders who are part of the MS LEPSL family. You can find more episodes of Blue Leadership on Facebook and YouTube, and if you'd like to learn more about the LEPSL program, visit us at criminaljustice.sandiego.edu.